"I need to see you," she said. Not a request, a decision she'd already made before she dialed. That voice belonged to Sienna, Caleb's best friend. The woman who had sat across from me at 37 dinners over 18 months, I counted them eventually, the way you count things that don't quite add up, smiled in a way that never fully reached her eyes, and then, according to every person in our shared orbit, spent those same 18 months telling anyone who would listen that she had always hated me. From the very first night, before I'd said a word, I almost didn't answer. Her name in my phone still said Caleb Sienna, which tells you something about how I'd understood my place in that friendship. Borrowed, conditional, existing only because of the man who'd introduced us. But my thumb hit accept without consulting my brain, and the silence that came first told me this wasn't a misdial. "Okay," I said. "Where?" She named a coffee shop on Meridian, not the one our whole group had used, not anywhere adjacent to Caleb's usual geography, neutral ground she'd selected deliberately. I said I could be there in 40 minutes, and she said don't change your mind, which is not the kind of thing you say unless you're worried you might change your own. Here is what you should know about Sienna, and about what I thought of her, and about the gap between those two things. When I first met her, I thought she was the gravitational center of Caleb's world. Every story he told about his past ran through her. She'd been there for the bad breakup, the failed business, the year he didn't speak to his father. She was his continuity. I tried, from the first month, to win her over. I brought wine to the dinners she organized. I remembered the name of her dog and her sister and the promotion she was working toward. I laughed at the right moments and stayed quiet when the conversation clearly wanted to happen without me. I tried to become someone she could tolerate, and then someone she might actually like. She was always pleasant to my face. Warm, even, in the practiced way of someone who has spent years being warm at people as a social skill rather than a genuine impulse. And then, later, when Caleb and I ended, when the whole architecture of that relationship came down in the specific and ugly way it did, I found out what she'd actually been saying the whole time. She was never right for you, she'd told Caleb, apparently, within weeks of meeting me. I've never trusted her energy, she'd told their mutual friends, the kind of sentence that sounds like intuition but functions as a verdict. I've always hated her, honestly, said at a birthday dinner 8 months before we broke up, at a table I was not invited to. Someone there had repeated it to someone, who repeated it to me, 6 weeks after the relationship ended, over 2 glasses of wine and a look of genuine apology. I'd sat with that information for 4 months. Not bitterly, exactly. More the way you sit with something that doesn't fit the shape of what you remember. Because when I played back those 37 dinners, I couldn't find the hatred. I could find a performance. I could find a woman maintaining a careful, managed distance. But hatred, actual and unconcealed, usually shows. It leaves fingerprints. And in all that time, what Sienna had left was something else entirely. Something that had bothered me without my having words for it until exactly now. She hadn't been hating me, she'd been watching me. And now, on a Tuesday morning I had otherwise planned to spend entirely on emails, she wanted to see me, without Caleb. Without a reason she was willing to state over the phone. I picked up my keys. The walk from my apartment to Meridian was 22 minutes on a good day. I left 10 minutes early because I needed time outside my head, which is a different thing than time inside it, though I could feel both wanting my attention. Caleb and I had ended 7 months ago. Long enough to know you made the right call, short enough that certain things, his handwriting on a delivery note, a specific song that had belonged to us, still required a small and deliberate recovery before continuing. The end hadn't been dramatic from the outside, no screaming in a parking lot, no thrown objects. It had been the slow accumulation of a feeling I kept trying to name and couldn't, until one evening he dismissed something I said in front of a group of friends, casually, without heat, and I watched his face while he did it, and understood, all at once, that he had never thought of me as someone whose thinking he took seriously. He liked what I looked like agreeing with him. He liked my presence in the room, in his photographs, at his side at the things he was invited to. He collected people the way certain people collect rooms in a house, not to live in them, but to keep the doors closed and feel the square footage. But my actual perspective, what I thought when I thought on my own, who I was when I wasn't curated for his life, the version of me that had opinions he hadn't approved, those parts he'd filed somewhere he never opened, and he'd been patient enough about it that I'd mistaken the patience for acceptance. I ended it 3 days later. He cried, which surprised me. Then he was fine, which didn't. My phone buzzed as I turned onto Franklin. It was a text from Dara, one of the mutual friends who'd first told me about Sienna's dinner table comment. Just a short message, the kind that looks casual but arrives with the weight of something deliberately sent. "Hey, did Sienna reach out to you? She's been asking people for your number. Thought you should know before you were caught off guard. Also, I never said this before because it felt mean while you were still with him, but she used to say stuff about you. Like, a lot. Always hated her. Never understood the appeal. Pretty constantly, actually. Just thought you deserved the full picture. I stopped walking for a moment. 37 dinners, pleasant face, practiced warmth. Always hated her. Never understood the appeal. I typed back, she called me this morning. Meeting her in 10. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, be careful. Which told me that Dara knew something she wasn't going to put in a text. I kept walking. The city had that specific morning quality of having already been running for hours without me. Delivery trucks, steam, someone arguing on a phone in a language I didn't speak with a tone that translated across all of them. I thought about what I was walking toward. Sienna had asked for my number. That meant she hadn't had it independently. Caleb had always been the relay. She'd had to actively seek it out, then called rather than texted, which is something people do when they want to control the pace of a conversation. Text gives the other person time to construct. She'd said not for him, which meant there was a version of this meeting that would have been for him, and she'd rejected it. I thought about the way she'd said don't change your mind before hanging up, the small pressure in it. The implication that she was working against a clock on something, and that I was part of the variable she couldn't control. Whatever was about to happen in that coffee shop, she had decided it before she called me. I was the last step in a sequence that had already mostly played out without my knowledge. The door to the cafe was glass. Through it I could see Sienna sitting at a corner table, 2 drinks already waiting, her hands around one of the cups like she needed something to hold. She looked up the exact second I pushed the door open. She looked, I realized, like someone who had been afraid and had decided to stop being afraid. Those 2 states simultaneously. The face of a decision made under cost. "You came," she said. "You asked," I said. We sat with the drinks between us for a moment that lasted longer than a moment. She was wearing something that wasn't her usual style, less composed, like she'd gotten dressed for a different plan and hadn't had time to change for this one. Her phone was face down on the table, and she kept her right hand near it without touching it, a person keeping an exit close. "I want to explain something," she said, "and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." "Okay. I was not kind to you when you were with Caleb." She said it directly. No preamble, no softening construction. Just the fact, placed on the table between the coffee cups. "I know," I said. "What do you know?" "That you told people you always hated me." She absorbed that. Nodded once, like the information confirmed something she'd suspected. "Who told you?" "More than one person eventually." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "I need you to understand that what I said about you, the hating, that was a performance." It was something I said because saying anything else would have been, she stopped, started again. "Because he asked me once, directly, whether I liked you, and I made the mistake of saying I thought you were actually pretty good. And the way he looked at me when I said that." Her phone buzzed on the table. Face down, so the screen showed nothing. But the buzz moved it slightly, and her hand shot out to catch it, and in doing so she flipped it, briefly, for half a second. And in that half second I saw the screen before the notification locked it again. My name. My full name, first and last, sitting above the notification preview. And under my name, where a contact description usually lives, 2 words I was never supposed to see. The one. She turned it back over. Fast. Her eyes came up to mine and she went completely still, the way a person goes still when they're deciding whether the other person caught what just happened. I had caught it. She knew I had caught it. We both understood in the same second that this was not going to be mentioned. Not yet. Maybe not today. "He asked you to hate me," I said, very carefully, keeping my voice level. She exhaled. "He didn't say it that way. He never says things directly. He said something like, I just need one person in my corner right now. And the implication was that being in his corner meant not being in yours. And you chose his corner. I chose to keep my access, she said. Which I know is not, she stopped again. I need to tell you why I needed access. I need to tell you what I was watching for. But I can't do it here, and I can't do it today. She reached into her bag and put a USB drive on the table between us. Small, plain, no label. Don't look at this until I call you. I'll call you tonight. There are things on there that will make more sense if I explain them first. I looked at the drive. I looked at her. Sienna, I said. What is happening? Something I should have stopped sooner, she said. And something I'm stopping now. She stood up. She picked up her phone and her bag in one motion, and paused beside the table with the look of someone delivering the last piece of a very long sentence. He's not going to leave you alone, she said. There are things in motion, from his side, things he thinks you don't know about, but you need to hear it from me first, because the version he's already telling is a lie, and I have the proof that it's a lie, and if I give it to you in the right order you can use it. She walked out. The door closed behind her. I looked at the USB drive sitting next to my untouched coffee. I didn't pick it up for a full 3 minutes. I took the drive home and put it on my kitchen counter and looked at it the way you look at something you're not sure is safe to open. She'd said to wait until she called. She'd said tonight. That was 4 hours away. I spent those 4 hours working, or performing the shape of working, which is not the same thing but produces similar output. I answered emails. I rescheduled a meeting. I made lunch and didn't eat most of it. I kept coming back to the USB drive on the counter, as if it might have moved. The call I was not expecting came at 2 in the afternoon. Not Sienna. Caleb. I hadn't had a real conversation with him since the end. Short, logistical texts. About a lamp he'd left at my place, a streaming subscription we'd shared, the co-signed lease that sat on his account as much as mine. The lease. 2 bedrooms, 18 months remaining, both our names on the document. A fact I'd tried not to think about too directly because thinking about it made my chest tighten in a specific way. I answered because not answering felt like handing him something. I heard you met with Sienna today, he said. No greeting, no performance. We had coffee, I said. She doesn't speak for me, whatever she said. She didn't say you sent her. A pause that lasted slightly too long. She's been going through something. She gets confused about where her loyalties should be. That's a strange thing to say about someone you've been friends with for 12 years. I'm calling about the apartment, he said. There it was. The pressure point, named without transition, without courtesy around it, because he wanted me to feel the speed of it. The tactic of a person who has realized he can't control you through affection and has switched to infrastructure. What about it? I said. I've been talking to my lawyer. There's a clause in the lease around documented behavioral concerns raised by co-tenants. You haven't lived there together, obviously, but my name is on that lease, and there are grounds to petition the landlord for a review based on reported behavior. The coldness in my stomach was something I had to recognize as information rather than paralysis. What reported behavior, I said. I sent some things to the property manager, he said, documenting things that happened during our relationship that I felt I had an obligation to disclose. What things? Concerning behavior. Things I witnessed. Things I have records of. Caleb. I'm not trying to make this ugly, he said, which was the most precise lie he'd said yet, because making it ugly was the entire architecture of the phone call. I'm just saying that if you want to sit down and have a real conversation about what's best for both of us going forward, I think we can find a resolution before anything needs to go further. What would further mean? He files the motion Monday, he said. And then, softer, that's 4 days. He hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, looking at the USB drive on the counter, understanding now what Sienna had meant by things in motion, understanding what a 4-day clock meant in real terms. Understanding that whatever was on that drive, I needed it before Monday more than I needed to follow any instruction about waiting. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't have saved. Don't open the drive yet. I know he called. I know what he said. I'll be at your door in an hour. She knocked exactly 53 minutes later, the kind of specific detail I remember because I'd been watching the door. She had a bag with her this time. Not her usual kind. Something larger and heavier. The bag of a person who had packed materials rather than a wallet and keys. She walked into my apartment the way a person walks into a place they've thought about walking into. Not unfamiliar exactly, just previously only imagined. He told you about the lease, she said. Monday, I said. He said his lawyer files Monday. There's no lawyer. She set the bag on my coffee table and unzipped it. There's a friend who passed the bar 7 years ago and has been letting Caleb say my lawyer ever since, because Caleb understands that my lawyer sounds more threatening than my friend who did real estate closings for 2 years before switching to finance. He won't file anything. Filing means record. Caleb doesn't want record. She pulled out a folder. But the landlord contact is real. He already sent something. I know what he sent because he CC'd me. He still thinks I'm on his side. I sat down. She opened the folder on the coffee table. Printed emails, screenshots, a document with a highlighted section. He told the property manager that you had been making threats during the relationship, she said. That he witnessed you threaten damage to the property during an argument. That he had texts. That didn't happen. I know, she said simply. I was at the argument he's describing. I was in the next room. He'd told me to come over. I think now he wanted a witness, but I don't think he expected me to actually pay attention to what happened. The argument was about a cup. You'd knocked a cup off the counter by accident and he made a 40-minute conversation out of it. You left. That's the argument. I looked at the folder. What are the texts? Screenshots of a conversation where you said, she turned to a page, I will break everything in this apartment before I let you touch my things. Clipped out of a conversation where you were talking about a box of your books he'd started going through. That conversation was about my books. Yes, the full screenshot exists. He has the cropped version. I have the original. She turned the folder toward me and I could see it. The exchange in full, context intact. My words about the books, his response, the word apartment used by me in a context that was entirely and obviously metaphorical. He sent the cropped version to the landlord, she said. The property manager told him they'd review by end of next week. That's the real deadline. Monday is theater. Slightly more time, but barely. There's also your editor, she said. At the magazine. He found her on LinkedIn. He sent a connection request last week. The coldness returned. My editor, the person who greenlit my work, who'd championed my last piece, who would have no context for whatever Caleb decided to say. What do we do, I said. You send the full context screenshots to the landlord tonight, before he knows you have them. You send them with a letter. I'll write it with you. She closed the folder. And then, you need to understand the full picture before you decide what else you want to do. Because the lease is the small thing. I looked at her. He's done this before, she said. She didn't mean in vague terms. She had names. She had timelines. Sienna opened the larger section of the bag and put 3 more folders on the coffee table, each labeled with a first name in her handwriting. I recognized one of them, a woman named Priya, who had dated Caleb for 11 months before me, who I had been told, by Caleb, by people who'd known him longer than I had completely unraveled after they split, become erratic, done things that were honestly kind of scary. I had believed that narrative the way you believe someone's past when you hear it from someone you trust, without verification, without the other party's account, without understanding that you were receiving a carefully edited version. Priya was in the folder. Contact information. A timeline. She didn't unravel, Sienna said. He filed a noise complaint against her apartment. She was renting from a building where a friend of his managed leasing, same play. Cropped texts, presented as documentation of threatening behavior. She was out inside of 3 weeks. She found stable housing again within 2 months. She's fine, she's good, we've spoken. But that scrambling period, that was him. The same him. I thought about the way Caleb had said concerning behavior on the phone. Not hot, not angry, just matter of fact, the way a person talks when they believe they're the one holding the facts. He told me Priya was the problem, I said. He told everyone, Sienna said. If you've been telling the story long enough before she gets to tell it, hers lands as defensiveness. And the others. The folder on the left is a woman named Ellie. Different mechanism. She owned her place, so not a lease. But her company. He wrote an anonymous concern letter to HR. No consequence, ultimately, because Ellie had enough standing there. but the attempt was the same. I sat with that for a moment. How long have you known? About the pattern. She looked at her hands. I started understanding it around month 8 of you and him. Before that I'd believed the same thing, that the women were the problem, that he just had bad luck in choosing people. She paused. He's very good at presenting his choice as your shortcoming. And you kept watching. I kept documenting, she said. Because I knew, the way you know things before you can prove them, that it was going to happen to you. And I needed it to be provable when it did. Here is where I have to tell you the thing that rearranged everything I thought I understood about the 18 months I'd spent in that circle of people. Sienna pulled out her phone, navigated to something, turned it toward me. A voice memo, time-stamped 14 months ago, 11 months into my relationship with Caleb. Her own voice, recorded clearly, speaking to herself. He told me to say I hated her if anyone asked. Said it was easier if there was no question about where I stood. I don't hate her. I think she's the only one who might actually be faster than him. She took the phone back. The way my name is saved in your phone, I said. She looked at me steadily. That's a reminder I gave myself. Of what? Of what it looks like, she said, when someone sees a person clearly for what they are and doesn't flinch. She'd been watching, not hating, watching. He needed you to hate me, I said. Yes. And you needed to look like you did. Yes. Her voice dropped. I'm sorry it cost you what it cost you. We worked until nearly midnight. The letter to the landlord took 40 minutes to draft, and it was better for having 2 people building it. I knew the specific dates and context of every conversation Caleb had cited. Sienna had the original uncropped screenshots and the account of what she'd witnessed in the room. Together the letter wasn't defensive. It was precise. It named dates. It attached the full context screenshots, flagged the cropped versions Caleb had sent, and noted plainly that a party to the lease had provided the property manager with selectively edited documentation. I sent it at 9:47 p.m. with Sienna sitting across from me, and she watched me hit send, the way a person watches something that's been a long time coming, finally arrive. He'll know you have the originals, she said. Yes, he'll call. Let him. She smiled, briefly and without warmth, not unkindness. More the expression of someone who has been waiting for exactly this moment for a long time, and finds it less satisfying than they'd hoped, because satisfying would require the problem to not have happened. I sent my editor a message that night, brief, without panic, telling her simply that an ex-partner had been in contact, and that if she received any unsolicited communication concerning me, she should forward it to me before responding. She replied within 10 minutes, "On it. His request is declined. You okay?" I sat back and breathed for the first time all day. Sienna watched me read the reply. "Good," she said. "One more thing," I said. "The actual reason you called me this morning. Not the lease, not the editor." She looked at the folders on the table. She looked at her phone. She looked at me. "I need a witness," she said. "For what comes next?" She'd been building the file for 8 months. Not recklessly. Carefully. The way someone builds something when they know it has to be waterproof, because the person on the other side of it is the kind of person who finds the leaks. She had the voice memo. She had a recorded phone call from 4 months ago in which Caleb had told her explicitly to keep eyes on me after the breakup and report back anything that would be useful. He'd used that word, useful, in the way a person uses a word when they mean something precise they don't want to say out loud. She had emails. She had the cropped screenshots alongside the originals retrieved from a shared backup she and Caleb maintained, which he had forgotten she still had access to. She had been, for 8 months, the most attentive enemy and the most careful ally I had never known I possessed. "I need to give this to someone," she said. "Not for a lawsuit. None of what he's done crosses a clean legal line, or he's too careful for it to, which is a different problem. There's a journalist. She writes about exactly this pattern, specifically, the way certain people use institutional mechanisms, lease clauses, HR contacts, professional networks, to manage and contain people who've seen them clearly. She's been looking for a documented case. And you need me. I need you on record as someone who experienced it directly. I'm the witness. You're the primary account. I understood what she was offering and what it would cost. Once the account was on record, it was on record. My name, my relationship, the details of what Caleb had tried to do with my apartment and my professional contacts. It would become something that existed in the world, with a version of Caleb's name attached to it that he had not written himself. I thought about Priya, who'd scrambled for housing for 2 months, and then had to rebuild from terrain Caleb had softened under her. I thought about Ellie, who'd had to fight an anonymous HR claim without knowing who'd filed it, what it said, or how to specifically refute what she couldn't see. "Yes," I said. Sienna nodded once. She looked, not relieved exactly, something more complicated. The expression of someone who has finished something very long and doesn't quite know what their hands are for now. "Why did you save my name that way?" I said. "The one." She looked out the window for a moment. "Because that's what I needed to remember," she said. "In the months when I had to sit across from him and perform the right opinions, I needed a reminder of what I was doing it for, what kind of person it was worth doing it for." She turned back to me. "You were the only one who never agreed with him about you. There it is. Sit with that for a second. Not the one he loved best, not the one who got away, the one who never let him define her, not even at the cost of comfort, not even when it would have been easier to absorb his version and live smaller inside it." She hadn't saved me as a romantic prospect. She'd saved me as a standard, a reminder, to herself, that the behavior Caleb couldn't tolerate was the behavior worth protecting. He called Thursday night. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 4 minutes long and contained, in order, 3 attempts at sounding reasonable, a reference to things going further than either of us wants, a suggestion that I was being influenced by people with their own agenda, and 1 sentence at the very end, delivered quietly, that said, "I just want you to know I still care about how this ends for you." I listened to it twice. I saved it. Friday morning, the property manager responded to my letter. She confirmed receipt of the full context documentation and stated that the matter was under review with updated materials in hand. She noted that single-party accounts without supporting context would be weighted accordingly. She used professional language, but the meaning beneath it was clean. The cropped screenshots, presented as proof of threatening behavior, then countered the same day with originals and an eyewitness account, had not held up. Caleb had prepared his move for weeks. It had taken us 11 hours to dismantle it. I texted Sienna. Property manager responded, "We're good." She sent back, "Of course you are." I called my editor and told her, briefly and without drama, the shape of what had happened. A former partner who'd tried to use professional contacts as leverage, preemptively blocked by the precision of our response. She listened without interrupting, asked one clarifying question, and then said something I've thought about since. "The people who do this count on you being too embarrassed to talk about it before they can talk about it first," she said. "You weren't." A pause. "That's actually the whole thing." It was the whole thing. Caleb sent 2 more messages over the weekend. They were different in tone from the first, less reasonable, more concerned with the specific fact that things had not gone as planned. He mentioned Sienna by name in the second one, referred to her as someone with her own reasons for turning this into something it isn't, which told me he'd realized where the documentation had come from and was already building the narrative that dismissed it. He'd been telling stories about people for a long time. He was writing another one. The difference was that this time there was a record. The original screenshots, the voice memo, the corroborated timeline, the property manager's response, the journalist already drafting her piece, all of it sitting in files on 2 separate drives and 2 cloud accounts, documented, time-stamped, and corroborated. He could write what he wanted. The record was already elsewhere, intact. On Sunday, I asked Sienna something that had been sitting at the edge of our conversations all week. "Were you actually ever in his corner?" I said. "Or was it always this?" She thought about it honestly, which I appreciated. "In the beginning," she said, "I was just his friend. I believed what he said about the women before you. I want to be honest about that. It took time and proximity and paying attention." A pause. "But by the time you came along, by the time I watched how he talked about you when you weren't there versus how he talked to you when you were, I was already starting to understand the shape of it." She looked at her coffee. "He talks to people like they're an audience. You talk to people like they're a person. I noticed. You could have warned me." "Yes," she said simply, "I could have. I'm sorry I didn't. No explanation, no mitigation, just the acknowledgement, and the room to sit with it, and the understanding that some things are too late to undo, and the right response to that is to not pretend otherwise. Here is the thing about being survived by documentation. Caleb will tell a version of these events, and he will believe it, not because he's stupid, but because the version he tells is the one in which he was right, and the situation moved against him through the disloyalty of someone he trusted, and the overreaction of someone he'd thought he'd managed. He will add it to the archive of women who had wronged him, and he will tell that archive to the next person who comes along, and that person will believe it the way I believed it when I heard the archive of Priya and Ellie and whatever came before them. What I can't fix is the cycle, exactly. What I can do, what Sienna could do, what Priya did by speaking to the journalist, what Ellie did by surviving the HR complaint without losing her standing, is make sure the record exists somewhere he didn't write it. The journalist piece came out 6 weeks later. It ran in a publication that covers the specific intersection of relationship dynamics and institutional misuse, not mainstream but specific, and read by people who understand the language. The piece was about the pattern, not the person. Composite details, changed names. What it did was name the mechanism with precision, the selective screenshot, the leveraged lease clause, the preemptive narrative delivered to shared social contacts before the other party knows to defend themselves. The way these tools get used, quietly, by people who understand which institutional systems will accept a one-party complaint without verification. 14 people messaged the journalist after it ran, recognizing the shape of what was described. I see Sienna now in a context that doesn't require either of us to manage it. We've had coffee twice in the week since everything settled, and it isn't easy exactly. There's a history there that doesn't dissolve because the ending was right, but it is honest. We're both people who understand, now, that honesty and ease are not the same thing, and that honesty is the more valuable of the two. She still has my name saved that way in her phone. I know because I saw it once more by accident, when she handed me her phone to pull up directions. She saw me see it. Neither of us said anything. Some things don't need to be said. They just need to have happened. What I want to ask you, sitting with this story, and however much of yourself you recognized inside it, because the reason these things find people is always because some part of them is true in a way that goes past the specific details. Have you ever looked back and realized that someone who seemed to dislike you was actually the only person in the room paying close attention, not to you specifically, but to the truth of what was happening around you? And have you ever understood, too late or maybe just in time, that the person who seemed to stand against you was the one trying to hold a door open, quietly, at cost to herself, in a room where everyone else had already decided which side they were on? If those questions pulled something specific to the surface, a person, a moment, a version of a situation you actually lived through, write it in the comments below. I want to hear it. And if this story found you when you needed it to, subscribe. There are more waiting.